The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what secrets it held. They dreamed of traveling between the stars, of meeting other beings, of finding their place in the universe. In the year 2347, that dream finally became real. Park stood at the viewport of the diplomatic vessel Horizon, watching the impossible structure grow larger as they approached. The Galactic Concord Station was a city floating in space, built around a dying red star. Millions of beings from hundreds of species lived there. It was the heart of galactic civilization, and humanity was about to knock on its door for the very first time. Was 53 years old, with gray hair at his temples and deep lines around his eyes. He had spent 30 years as a crisis negotiator back on Earth, talking down terrorists, mediating between nations, and finding peace where others saw only war. The United Earth Council had chosen him to be humanity's first ambassador to the galaxy. It was the greatest honor of his life, and also the heaviest burden. Behind him, Lieutenant checked her tablet for the 100th time. She was young, barely 30, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She spoke 14 Earth languages and had already learned 3 alien tongues during their 6-month journey. Her job was to help understand the beings they would meet, to read their body language and catch meanings that words might miss. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "I've finished reviewing the Council protocols. There are 12 elder races that make all the decisions. They've been ruling the galaxy for over 50,000 years. Most of them see younger species as children at best. And at worst," asked without turning from the viewport. Hesitated. "Insects, bacteria, things too small to notice." Nodded slowly. He had expected this. Humanity was young. Their civilization was only 10,000 years old. Their space travel was barely 3 centuries old. Compared to species that had sailed between stars when humans were still living in caves, Earth was a newborn crying in the dark. The door behind them slid open, and Captain Hand stepped onto the observation deck. He was a military man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that rarely showed emotion. He commanded the Horizon and its crew of 200, and he had made it clear from the start that his only mission was to bring his people home safely. "We've received docking instructions," reported. "They're putting us in Section 47. I looked it up. It's where they dock garbage ships and quarantine vessels." His face tightened with anger but simply smiled. "Then we will make Section 47 famous." The docking process took 3 hours. When the Horizon finally connected to the station, a delegation of 4 beings was waiting for them, studied them through the airlock window before stepping out. The first was a creature that stood on 4 legs and had 4 arms. Its body was covered in hard black shell, and its face had no readable expression. Large compound eyes reflected the light like dark mirrors. According to research, they were one of the oldest races, known for their cold logic and complete lack of emotion. The second was and had to stop himself from starring. It was over 3 meters tall, and its body appeared to be made entirely of living crystal. Light passed through it in strange ways, creating rainbows that shifted with every movement. They were said to live for thousands of years, and to consider all organic life forms to be crude and temporary. The other 2 beings were from species did not recognize. One looked like a floating cloud of silver mist. The other resembled a small tree that walked on its roots. Both kept their distance from the humans, as if afraid of contamination. The spoke first. Its voice was a series of clicks and hisses that its translator device converted into flat, emotionless words. "You are the Earth beings. You are late. The Council does not appreciate waiting." Bowed his head respectfully. "We apologize for any delay. Our ships are slower than yours. We are still learning." This compound eyes seemed to focus on him more intently. "Learning, yes, that is what children do. Follow." They walked through the station for nearly an hour. Kept his face calm, but inside he was amazed by everything he saw. The corridors were vast, built for species of all sizes. Beings of every shape and color moved around them, some walking, some floating, some crawling on walls and ceilings. The air smelled strange, a mixture of 1,000 different atmospheres being carefully balanced. And everywhere they went, other beings stopped to stare at them. Heard whispers translated by his device. "Those are the new ones from that small planet, Earth they call it. Look how fragile they seem. Do they really only live for 80 years? I heard they almost destroyed their own world, twice. Why does the Council even bother with such primitive creatures?" Walked close to and spoke in Korean, hoping the translators would not pick it up. "They're treating us like animals in a zoo." "Then we will be the most dignified animals they have ever seen," replied in the same language. "Keep your head high. Show them nothing but grace." Captain said nothing, but his jaw was tight, and his hands had curled into fists at his sides. They were brought to a small waiting chamber and told that the Council would see them in 2 days. 2 days of waiting in a room barely large enough for the three of them, with food that tasted like cardboard and water that smelled like metal. On the second night, could not sleep. She sat on the floor, reviewing everything she knew about the Council species, looking for any advantage they might use. "Ambassador," she said finally, "I need to tell you something. In all the records I've studied, I found something interesting. In the past 10,000 years, the Council has reviewed over 300 new species for membership. Do you know how many were accepted?" Looked at her with tired eyes. "How many?" 11. And of those 11, 8 were later expelled for various reasons. Only 3 species have successfully joined the conquered in 10,000 years. So our chances are very small. "Our chances are almost zero." His voice cracked slightly. "Ambassador, I don't think they ever plan to accept us. This whole thing might just be a formality, a way to look at us, judge us, and send us away." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to the small window that looked out at the dying red star at the center of the station. "When I was young," he said softly, "my grandmother told me a story. She said that when Korea was occupied by foreign powers, when our people had nothing, when the world looked down on us, we survived by doing one thing. We kept our dignity, we kept our hope, and we kept being kind even to those who were cruel to us." He turned to face, and tomorrow they may mock us, they may insult us, they may reject us. But they will never be able to say that humanity came to the stars without grace. Whatever happens, we will show them who we really are. Finally spoke, his voice rough. "And who are we, Ambassador?" Smiled, and for the first time since they arrived, there was warmth in his eyes. "We are the people who never give up. We are the people who help strangers. We are the people who believe that tomorrow can be better than today." He placed his hand on his shoulder. "We are human, and that is enough." The next morning they received the summons. The Council was ready to see them. Straightened his simple black suit, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. Whatever waited for them, he would face it with his head held high. The Council chamber was the largest room Park had ever seen. It was shaped like a bowl, with thousands of seats rising up in circles around a central platform. Every seat was filled. Beings of every shape, size, and color looked down at the small platform where stood alone. Above him, on 12 floating thrones, sat the high speakers of the Galactic Conquered. These were the rulers of the galaxy, the voices of the 12 eldest races. They had guided civilization for 50,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched stars die and new ones be born. And now they were looking at a single human being standing before them like a speck of dust. Felt very small, but he did not let it show on his face. High Speaker of the spoke first. His crystalline body pulsed with inner light as his voice filled the chamber like music made of glass. "The Council recognizes the species known as humanity from the planet called Earth. You have requested consideration for membership in the Galactic Conquered. Is this correct?" "It is correct," High Speaker replied. His voice was steady. He had spoken in rooms full of angry people before. He had negotiated with killers and he could handle this. Very well, gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. We have reviewed the materials you submitted regarding your species. We will now discuss what we have learned. The display showed Earth spinning slowly in the darkness of space. It was beautiful thought, blue and green and white. Home. Your species is approximately 200,000 years old, continued. You achieved basic civilization roughly 10,000 years ago, space travel 300 years ago, interstellar capability only 50 years ago. By the standards of this council, you are infants. There was a ripple of something through the crowd, amusement perhaps. But age alone does not determine worth, said. Let us examine your history. What followed was the most painful hour of life. The display showed image after image of humanity's worst moments. Wars that killed millions, bombs that destroyed cities in seconds, factories that poisoned rivers and skies, forests burned to ash, animals driven to extinction, people starving while others threw away food, children working in mines, slaves building monuments. And through it all the council watched, some with disgust, some with pity, some with cold clinical interest like scientists studying bacteria. Consul of the leaned forward. Her compound eyes glittered as she spoke in that clicking, hissing voice. We find your history fascinating, human. You divided yourselves based on the color of your skin. Can you explain this? Swallowed, it was ignorance and fear. We have learned better. Have you? Another image appeared, showing protests and conflicts from Earth's recent past. It seems you still struggle with this simple concept. We are still learning, said. We are not perfect. A sound came from the crowd. It took a moment to realize it was laughter. Beings from dozens of species were laughing at him. High Speaker raised a crystalline hand for silence. Let us continue. You nearly destroyed your own atmosphere for economic gain. Your industries poisoned your world's water and air. You came within years of making your planet uninhabitable. Is this accurate? Yes, said. It is accurate, but we also fixed it. We came together as a species and healed our world. It took 100 years, but we did it. After nearly killing yourselves through stupidity, Consul clicked. This is not impressive. This is a child learning not to touch fire by burning itself. More laughter. Another High Speaker spoke, a being that looked like a cloud of golden light. Your species fights constantly. Even now, there are conflicts on your world. You have weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization, and you point them at each other. How can we trust such a species with access to the galaxy? Closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of and waiting outside the chamber. He thought of everyone back on Earth, hopping for good news. He thought of his grandmother, who had survived war and occupation and had still believed in the goodness of people. He opened his eyes. You are right, he said. Everything you have shown is true. We have done terrible things to each other. We have been cruel and stupid and destructive. I will not deny any of it. The chamber fell silent. They had expected him to argue, to make excuses, to defend humanity's honor. His acceptance caught them off guard. But I would like to ask the council a question, continued. In your 50,000 years of civilization, have any of your species ever done terrible things? Have any of you ever had wars? Have any of you ever made mistakes that cost lives? The silence stretched. We are young, said. We have made young mistakes, but we are also young in another way. We still have hope. We still believe we can be better. We still dream of a future where all humans live in peace, not just with each other, but with all beings in the galaxy. He looked up at the 12 High Speakers. We do not claim to deserve membership in your Concord. We only ask for the chance to learn, to grow, to prove that we can be worthy partners in this great civilization. Consul made a sound that might have been a snort. Pretty words, but words do not change facts. Your species is primitive, violent, and self-destructive. You have nothing to offer the conquered except trouble. High Speaker nodded slowly. The council will deliberate. Was escorted to a small room adjacent to the chamber, and were there, their faces pale with worry. How bad was it? Asked. They showed everything, said quietly. Every war, every genocide, every mistake we ever made. His face darkened. And what did you say? I told them the truth, that we have done terrible things, but we are trying to be better. The deliberation took less than 1 hour. When was called back to the chamber, he already knew what the answer would be. The speed of the decision told him everything. High Speaker's voice echoed through the vast room. The galactic conquered has reached a decision. The species known as humanity is membership. Earth will be designated a protected primitive zone. You will be restricted to your own solar system. Contact with other species will be limited to observation only. You may apply again in 1,000 years if your species survives that long. Bowed his head. I understand. Thank you for your consideration. He turned to leave. His legs felt heavy. His heart felt heavier. Human. He stopped. The voice belonged to Consul. Return to your dying little world, small creature, she said, and there was something ugly in her clicking voice. Play with your weapons. Fight your little wars. Perhaps in 1,000 years, if you do not destroy yourselves, we will let you try again. But I doubt it. Species like yours rarely survive their own nature. The crowd laughed again. Did not respond. He simply walked out of the chamber, his back straight, his face calm. But inside something was burning. Not anger, not shame, something else. Determination. Fell into step beside him as he walked through the corridors back towards Section 47. Ambassador, I'm so sorry. I know how much this meant to you. It's not over, said quietly. Frowned. What do you mean? They rejected us. They're sending us home. Stopped walking. He looked at his 2 companions and there was fire in his eyes. They rejected our application, he said. They did not reject who we are. They think they know us because they read our history. They think we are nothing but our worst moments. He shook his head. They are wrong, and someday, somehow, we will show them just how wrong they are. An alarm began to scream. Red lights flashed throughout the corridor. Automated voices spoke in a dozen languages, warning of emergency, warning of danger. Looked at what's happening. She was already checking her tablet, her face growing pale. There's been a reactor failure. In the lower districts, it's catastrophic. Thousands of beings are trapped down there. Grabbed her arm. Lower districts, that's not far from our dock. No, whispered, it's not. The 3 humans looked at each other. And in that moment, without speaking a single word, they all understood what they had to do. They started running. The alarms were everywhere now. Red lights painted the corridors in bloody color. Beings of all species ran past Park and his companions, pushing and shoving, desperate to get away from the lower districts. His tablet was filled with emergency broadcasts. The reactor in Section 12 is failing. They're estimating complete meltdown in less than 2 hours. The entire lower district will be destroyed. How many people are down there? Asked as they ran. The reports say 15,000, maybe more, workers, refugees, service castes, the beings who keep the station running. Grabbed a passing alien, a small creature with blue fur and frightened eyes. Where are the evacuation ships? Where are they taking the survivors? The creature stared at him with confusion. Survivors from the lower district. It made a sound that might have been sad laughter. There are no evacuation ships for the lower district. The protocols are clear. Essential personnel first. Upper district residents first. The lower castes. It pulled away from his grip. The lower castes are acceptable losses. It ran off, disappearing into the crowd. Stood frozen. He could not believe what he had just heard. Acceptable losses, they're just leaving them to die. His voice was shaking. I'm looking at the emergency protocols now. He's right. The Concord has a tiered evacuation system based on species ranking and social value. The lower districts are last priority. With only 2 hours until meltdown, they'll never reach them in time. They're not even going to try, said. His voice was cold with anger. 15,000 people, and they're not even going to try. They reached a viewing platform overlooking the lower districts. From here, could see the chaos below. Smoke was rising from several sections. Small fires had broken out, and through it all, beings were running, screaming, trying to find a way out. The emergency bulkheads were closing. Massive doors, 10 meters thick, were slowly sealing off the lower districts from the rest of the station. Once they closed, no one could get in or out. The bulkheads will seal in 30 minutes, reported. After that, everyone inside is trapped. Looked at the scene below. He saw a mother carrying 2 children on her back. He saw an elderly, its crystalline body cracked and dim, stumbling through the smoke. He saw beings of species he could not even name, all of them terrified, all of them abandoned by the great galactic Concord. These were the beings that served the food, that cleaned the corridors, that fixed the machines. These were the beings that made the station work, and now they were being left to die because they were not important enough to save. The horizon said suddenly. Looked at him, what? The horizon, our ship, how many people can it hold? Ambassador, that's not. How many, Captain? His jaw tightened. If we strip the cargo holds, remove non-essential equipment, push life support to maximum, maybe 3,000, maybe a little more. That's 3,000 lives, said. 3,000 people who don't have to die today. Ambassador, our dock is on the other side of the station. We'd have to fly through active emergency zones. We'd be violating every protocol the Concord has. They could fire on us. Would they? Was silent for a moment. Then slowly a grim smile spread across his face. Honestly, I don't think they'd bother. We're just primitive humans after all. What damage could we possibly do? Grabbed's arm. Ambassador, if we do this, we might not have enough fuel to get home. The ship could be damaged beyond repair. We could all die. Looked at her. Lieutenant, an hour ago, the Council told us that humanity has nothing to offer the galaxy. They said we are violent and selfish and primitive. He looked back at the chaos below. I think it's time we showed them what humanity really looks like. They ran. The next 20 minutes were a blur. They reached the horizon and shouted orders to his crew. Cargo was dumped. Seats were torn out. Every spare centimeter was prepared for survivors. We're launching in 5 minutes, announced over the intercom. All hands prepare for emergency operations. This is not a drill. We are going to save as many lives as we can. Anyone who wants to stay behind, I understand. No one will think less of you. Not a single person left their post. The horizon undocked and flew toward the lower districts. Station traffic control screamed at them to turn back. Warning shots were fired across their bow. Ignored all of it. There, pointed at her screen. Emergency Dock 7, it's still accessible. We can get in through there. The ship shuddered as pushed the engines harder than they were designed to go. Alarms blared inside the cockpit. A piece of debris struck their hull, leaving a long scar along the port side. But they made it. The horizon docked at emergency port 7, with 10 minutes to spare before the bulkhead sealed completely. Was the first one off the ship. Smoke burned his eyes and throat. The air was hot, almost too hot to breathe, but he ran into the chaos anyway. This way, he shouted in every language his translator could produce. There's a ship. We can take you to safety. At first, the beings around him didn't believe it. Why would anyone come for them? They were lower caste. They were expendable. No one had ever come for them before. But then they saw the ship. They saw the human crew standing at the entrance, waving them in, and they started to run. Worked like she had never worked before. She organized the evacuation, directing different species to different parts of the ship. She found a child who had been separated from her mother and carried the girl on her back for an hour until they were reunited. Was everywhere at once. When a door jammed, he kicked it open. When a beam fell across a corridor, he lifted it with his bare hands, veins bulging in his neck, and held it until everyone had passed. When an elderly collapsed from smoke inhalation, threw the being over his shoulder and carried them the last 100 meters to the ship. Found a pregnant female sitting alone in a collapsed corridor. Her crystalline body was cracked in several places, leaking light like blood. She had given up. "Leave me," she said. "I am dying anyway, save the others." Knelt beside her. "What's your name?" She looked at him with eyes that swirled with fatting colors. "Why do you care? I am no one. My own kind left me here." "My name is Park," he said. "I'm from a planet called Earth, and I'm not leaving this station without you." He helped her stand. She was heavy, far heavier than any human, but didn't stop. Step by step, he guided her through the smoke and fire toward the ship. "Why?" she asked as they walked. "Why are you doing this? The Council rejected your species. We mocked you. Why would you help us?" Smiled even though his lungs were burning and his legs were shaking. "Because you needed help. That's all the reason we need." The bulkheads were closing. They had less than 2 minutes. His voice came over his communicator. "Ambassador, we're out of time. The reactor is going critical." "Get the ship ready to launch," replied. "We're coming." The last 50 meters were the longest of his life. He could hear the bulkheads grinding shut behind them. He could feel the heat of the coming explosion building in the walls. The pregnant was barely conscious, leaning on him with all her weight. But they made it. The airlock slammed shut behind them just as the bulkheads closed completely. The Horizon's engines roared to life and pulled them away from the dying section of the station with seconds to spare. The reactor exploded. The entire lower district collapsed in a storm of fire and debris. From the viewports of the Horizon, the survivors watched as everything they had known was destroyed. But they were alive. 2,847 beings, 17 different species, all of them saved by a ship full of primitive humans who had refused to accept that some lives were more valuable than others. In the cargo hold, crammed together in the darkness, the survivors began to understand what had happened. They looked at the humans moving among them, offering water, bandaging wounds, speaking soft words of comfort. And slowly, one by one, they began to weep. Not from fear, from gratitude. On the bridge collapsed into his captain's chair. His hands were burned, his uniform was torn, but he was smiling. "We did it," he said. "We actually did it." Leaned against a console, exhausted beyond words. "The Council is going to be furious." Stood at the viewport looking back at the damaged station. "Let them be furious. We did what was right. That's all that matters." Behind them, somewhere in the cargo hold, a child began to sing. It was a simple song, a lullaby perhaps, in a language none of the humans understood. But somehow they all knew what it meant. "Thank you." The emergency station was small, designed only for temporary shelter during disasters. It was never meant to hold 3,000 beings, but somehow they made it work. Medical teams from a dozen species arrived within hours of the Horizon's distress call. Ships brought food, water, medicine, and blankets. The survivors of the lower district were treated for burns, smoke inhalation, and shock. Many of them would carry scars for the rest of their lives, but they were alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. Park sat in a corner of the station's small observation deck, watching the ships come and go. He had not slept in 36 hours. His lungs still hurt from the smoke. His hands were wrapped in bandages from where he had grabbed hot metal without thinking, but he could not bring himself to rest. Not yet. Found him there, staring out at the stars. "Ambassador, you need to sleep," she said gently. "Later," he replied. Have you heard anything from the council? Hesitated. There have been communications. The official position is that we violated emergency protocols, endangered station security, and caused significant damage to conquered property. She paused. They're demanding we turn over the horizon for inspection and that you personally appear before the council to answer for our actions. Laughed. It was a tired, empty sound. So we saved 3,000 lives and they want to put us on trial. That's what I thought at first, but Ambassador sat down beside him. Something is happening, something they didn't expect. What do you mean? The survivors are talking. Not to officials, not to the media, but to everyone they know. Their families, their friends, their communities. They're telling the story of what happened in the lower district, and the story is spreading. Over the next 2 days, saw what meant. The official Concord news channels barely mentioned the rescue. When they did, they described it as an unauthorized action by a primitive species that needlessly complicated relief efforts. They did not mention how many lives were saved. They did not mention that the council had left the lower district to die. But the truth spread anyway. A worker who had been rescued posted a message on a public network. I was told to stay at my station. I was told help was coming. It never came. The only ship that came for us was flown by humans, a species the council rejected hours before. They came back. They came back for us. A merchant recorded a video from his hospital bed. His voice was weak, but his words were strong. I have lived for 400 years. I have seen many things, but I have never seen anyone do what those humans did. They had every reason to leave. We mocked them. We called them primitive, and they came into the fire to carry us out. An elderly, the same one that had carried to safety, gave an interview that was shared millions of times. The human captain, he was hurt, burned, exhausted, but he would not stop. He would not leave anyone behind. I asked him why. He said it was because we needed help. That was all. We needed help, so he helped. I do not understand such beings, but I think we have much to learn from them. The stories kept coming. Thousands of them. Small moments of kindness that had happened in the chaos of the rescue. A human crew member giving her oxygen mask to a child. A human engineer working for hours to free trapped survivors from wreckage. A human medic treating patients of species she had never seen before, learning their biology on the spot, refusing to give up even when told it was hopeless. And then there was the story of the pregnant female. Her name was, she had been abandoned by her own clan because her pregnancy was unexpected and unwanted. She had been working in the lower district as a cleaning worker, the lowest possible job for her species. When the reactor failed, no one came for her. She had sat down in that collapsed corridor and waited to die. And then a human had found her. This interview was the one that changed everything. He knelt beside me, she said, her crystalline body pulsing with soft light as she spoke. This strange, small, soft creature, he asked my name. No one had asked my name in years. I was just the cleaner or the pregnant one. But he asked my name. She paused, collecting herself. I told him to leave me. I said I was no one. I said my own kind had left me there. And he said something I will never forget. He said, I'm not leaving this station without you. And then he helped me walk. For what felt like hours, he helped me walk through fire and smoke and falling debris. He was so small, so fragile. I weighed 3 times what he did, but he never let go of me. The interviewer asked why she thought he had done it. I asked him the same question, said. I asked why he was helping me when his own people had been rejected by the council, when we had mocked them, when we had called them primitive and worthless. What did he say? Light pulsed brighter. He said, because you needed help, that's all the reason we need. The interview was viewed over 2 billion times in 3 days. The council had no choice but to respond. A special session was called. Representatives from every species on the station were invited to attend. The chamber was filled beyond capacity, with beings standing in the aisles and watching on screens throughout the station. High Speaker opened the session with a prepared statement. The recent incident in the lower district was a tragedy. The Galactic Concord expresses its condolences to those affected. However, we must also address the unauthorized actions of the human delegation, which violated numerous protocols and— "Forgive me, High Speaker." A voice from the observation tiers interrupted him. It was a female with dark eyes and trembling legs. She was not a council member, not an official of any kind. She was a worker, a technician, one of the lower castes. "This being will be silent," Consul commanded. "She has no right to speak in this chamber." "She has every right." Another voice, this one from a representative, a minor species that rarely spoke in council sessions. "If we are discussing what happened in the lower district, then the beings who were there should speak." "This is highly irregular," High Speaker protested. "So is leaving 15,000 people to die," someone called from the crowd. The chamber erupted. Beings who had never spoken before suddenly found their voices. Species that had been dismissed and overlooked for centuries stood up and demanded to be heard. And one by one, they told their stories. The mother spoke of the human woman who had carried her daughter to safety. The merchant spoke of the human captain who had refused to leave anyone behind. A dozen species, 100 voices, all telling the same story in different words. The humans had come for them. The humans, who had been rejected and mocked and dismissed, had risked everything to save strangers. When the last survivor had spoken, the chamber fell silent. High Speaker looked at his fellow High Speakers. For the first time in anyone's memory, the ancient rulers of the galaxy seemed uncertain. They had protocols and procedures for everything, but they had no protocol for this. No procedure for a species that had proven itself not through power or technology, but through simple, stubborn kindness. Consul tried to speak. "This changes nothing. The humans still violated." "Be quiet." The voice belonged to another, the one who had spoken first, the one whose daughter had been saved by. "I have been silent my whole life," she said. "I have watched your council make decisions that hurt the weak to protect the strong. I have watched you build a civilization on the backs of beings you consider worthless. And I never said anything because I was taught that I had no right to speak." She stepped forward into the center of the chamber. "But today I am speaking, because a species you called primitive taught me something your conquered forgot a long time ago. Every life has value, every being deserves help, and true strength is not measured by power but by compassion." She looked up at the 12 High Speakers. "The humans showed us who they really are. Now the question is, who are we?" The chamber remained silent. No one had an answer. But for the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Concord was listening. 3 days after the survivors spoke in the council chamber, Park received a summons. The High Speakers wanted to see him, not for a trial, the message said, but for a conversation. Was worried. It could be a trap. They might be planning to arrest you as soon as you enter the chamber. Was more direct. "I'm coming with you. If they try anything, I'll get you out." But shook his head. "No, I'll go alone. If they wanted to arrest me, they would have done it already. Something has changed. I want to know what." He walked through the station corridors one more time. This time, the journey was different. Beings of all species stopped to look at him, but not with mockery or contempt. Some of them bowed their heads in respect. Others whispered words of thanks as he passed. A small child ran up to him and pressed a colorful stone into his hand before running away, too shy to say anything. Looked at the stone for a long moment. Then he put it in his pocket and continued walking. The council chamber was nearly empty this time. Only the 12 High Speakers remained, sitting on their floating thrones. The observation tiers were dark and silent. It felt like a completely different place. Walked to the center platform and waited. High Speaker spoke first. His crystalline body seemed dimmer than before, as if the events of the past week had drained some of his light. "Ambassador Park, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, High Speaker." Hesitated. For a being who had ruled for thousands of years, he seemed strangely uncertain. "We have reconsidered our position regarding your species." Said nothing, he simply waited. "The actions of your crew during the disaster have been noted. The survivors have made their feelings clear, and we have received communications from many member species expressing support for humanity's acceptance into the conquered." Consul made a small sound of disgust, but she did not speak. Continued. "The Council is prepared to offer humanity provisional membership. You would have limited voting rights and restricted access to certain technologies, but you would no longer be classified as a primitive species. You would have a seat among us, pending a full review in 100 years." It was more than had ever expected. A week ago, this would have been everything he wanted, everything Earth had hoped for. But something had changed, not in the Council but in himself. "No," he said. The word echoed through the silent chamber. The High Speakers stared at him in disbelief. "No," repeated, "you are refusing membership." "I am refusing provisional membership," clarified. "I am refusing to join a council that classifies its own people based on their perceived value. I am refusing to be part of a system that would leave 15,000 beings to die because they were not important enough to save." Consul's mandibles clicked with anger. "You arrogant creature, we are offering you everything your species wanted and you dare to refuse." "Yes," said calmly, "I dare." He looked around the chamber, at the 12 most powerful beings in the galaxy. "I watched your emergency protocols in action. I saw how your civilization works. The strong are protected, the weak are abandoned, the valuable are saved, the expendable are sacrificed." He shook his head. "We have had systems like that on Earth. We called them wrong. We fought to change them. Sometimes we failed. Sometimes we still fail, but we never stopped believing that every life matters equally." "Pretty words," another High Speaker said, a being made of silver mist. "But words do not build civilizations." "No," agreed, "actions do." He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 objects. One was the small, colorful stone the child had given him. The other was something he had carried with him from Earth, something his grandmother had given him on the day he left for the stars. It was a small wooden crane, hand-carved and worn smooth by decades of touch. Its wings were spread wide, as if it were about to take flight. "On Earth," said, "we have a tradition. When someone wrongs you and then shows true remorse, you don't demand proof. You don't require tests or trials or provisional periods. You simply begin again. You offer forgiveness. You give them a chance to become better." He walked forward, toward the central dais where the High Speakers sat. "This crane was carved by my grandmother. She survived a great war when she was young. She lost her home, her family, everything she knew. She had every reason to hate, every reason to be bitter and angry, but instead she chose to hope. She chose to believe that people could change. She chose to forgive." He placed the crane on the dais, beside the stone from the child. "This is not a bribe. It's not a treaty or a bargain. It's a gift, freely given, no conditions, no expectations." He stepped back and looked up at the High Speakers. "We came to the stars looking for friends. We hoped to find beings who could teach us, who could help us grow, who could show us wonders we had never imagined. Instead, we found a civilization built on hierarchy and fear. We found beings who had forgotten how to hope." His voice grew stronger. "But we also found individuals who remembered, survivors who thanked us for saving them, a mother who spoke up in this chamber even though she had been told her whole life that she had no right to speak, a child who gave a stone to a stranger because she wanted to say thank you." He smiled, and there was warmth in his eyes. "The Galactic Conquered is not ready for humanity, but more importantly, we are not ready for the conquered as it is now. So we're going home. We will continue to grow. We will continue to learn. And someday, when we return, we hope to find a galaxy that has learned something too." He turned and began to walk toward the exit. "Wait." The voice came from Consul of all beings, stopped but did not turn around. "You would just leave. After everything, you would give us a gift and ask for nothing in return." Turned his head slightly. "I would offer you something your conquered forgot a long time ago, Consul. The belief that anyone can change, that the past doesn't have to define the future, that even those who mock you today might stand beside you tomorrow." He faced the exit again. "We'll be returning to Earth now. If any of you ever want to talk as equals rather than judges, you know where to find us." He walked out of the chamber. His footsteps echoed in the vast silence. None of the high speakers said a word. And were waiting outside. They fell into step beside him without asking questions. They could see from his face that something important had happened. The Horizon was waiting at its dock. The crew had repaired most of the damage from the rescue, though the ship would never look quite the same. Scars ran along its hull, marks of what they had done. As they boarded, took one last look at the Galactic Conquered station. It was still vast, still impressive, still home to millions of beings. But it seemed smaller now somehow, less intimidating. "Ambassador," said quietly, "what do we tell them back home? We came for membership and we're returning with nothing." "We're not returning with nothing," replied. "We're returning with something much more valuable than membership." "What's that?" Smiled a clear conscience and hope. The Horizon launched an hour later. As it pulled away from the station, heading for the long journey home, something unexpected happened. A small ship undocked from the station and fell into formation behind them, then another, and another. Checked her sensors in confusion. "Ambassador, we have 17 ships following us. They're not military, they're civilian vessels, refugees, survivors from the lower district." A communication came through. The face on the screen belonged to the pregnant female had carried through fire. "Ambassador Park," she said, "my child will be born in 3 months. I do not want her to be born in a place where some lives matter more than others. I do not want her to grow up believing she is worth less than anyone else." Her crystalline face pulsed with emotion. "May we come with you to Earth?" Looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked at, then at. The captain shrugged. "The more the merrier, I suppose." Was already calculating. "We'll need to modify life support for different species, adjust the food supplies, create appropriate environments. It will be complicated." "Can it be done?" asked. She smiled. "Humans have never let complicated stop us before." Turned back to the screen. "You and anyone else who wishes to come are welcome. Earth has room for everyone." More ships joined the convoy as news spread. By the time the Horizon reached the edge of the station's space, 43 ships were following, carrying over 2,000 beings who wanted to begin again. And back on the station, in the empty council chamber, the 12 high speakers sat in silence. High Speaker looked at the small wooden crane sitting on his dais. Such a simple thing, such a small gesture. But it had changed everything. "What do we do now?" one of the speakers asked. Had no answer. For the first time in 50,000 years, the rulers of the galaxy did not know what to do next. But far away, heading toward a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy, a fleet of ships carried hope toward the stars. And in the lead ship, Ambassador Park looked out at the infinite darkness and smiled. The debate was over. The real journey had just begun.